Mylin stood on the rain-dark platform with the last train screaming behind her, one hand wrapped around a torn blue ribbon, and the whole town shouting that she had poisoned a judge's witness. Lanterns swung in the prairie wind. A deputy reached for her medicine satchel. Across the tracks, Judge Jonah Creed came down from his horse with dust on his coat and grief in his eyes. The kind of grief that had already buried a wife and no longer trusted miracles. Mai could have run east back into the smoke and iron of the rails, but the ribbon in her fist was proof of something worse than her own shame. Before the whistle died, one man would have to decide whether an Eastern healer was a criminal, a liar, or the only soul brave enough to hold the truth. Before we begin, let me know where you are watching from. Leave your country name in the comments below. And if you love stories about courage, loyalty, and community, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next stories. The last evening train out of Blue Ribbon Crossing came in under a sky the color of bruised tin. It dragged smoke across the prairie and rattled the windows of the depot, where half the town had gathered with wet hats, hard faces, and questions nobody wanted answered to honestly. Rain struck the plank platform in silver needles. Horses stamped beyond the hitching rail. A church bell sounded once from the hill, not for worship, but because someone had pulled the rope when Deputy Holland ran through town crying that Judge Cree's witness had collapsed. Mylene stood beside a baggage cart, small and straight beneath a dark wool cloak, with her medicine satchel pressed against her ribs and a length of blue ribbon clutched in her gloved hand. The ribbon was damp. One end was torn ragged, as though it had been ripped from a prize card or a girl's hair. In the lantern light, the color shone too bright for such a grim hour. "Open the satchel," Deputy Holland said. May did not move. Behind him stood Mrs. Bell from the boarding house, Mr. Rover the freight agent, two cattle hands from the Rusk Ranch, and Elias Rusk himself, a broad-shouldered stockman in a black raincoat. Rusk's silver watch chain flashed whenever lightning stirred behind the clouds. He kept one hand tucked near his vest pocket and watched May as if she were an animal cornered behind a shed. "She dosed Caleb Pike this morning," Rusk said, loud enough for the crowd. "Now he cannot speak before court. You all know what she keeps in those bottles. Roots, powders, Eastern tricks." A murmur moved through the crowd. May's fingers tightened around the ribbon. "I gave Mr. Pike willow tea for fever. Nothing more." "Then why run for the train?" Rusk asked. The train hissed. Steam rolled around her boots. May looked toward the dock cars, their windows glowing amber, each one promising distance. She had bought no ticket. She had come to the depot because the last man who knew the truth had sent for her, and now he lay senseless in a room behind the freight office, his breath shallow, his shirt stained with mud from the alley. "I came because Caleb told me to meet him here," she said. "He said he had something tied with a blue ribbon." Rusk smiled without kindness. "A pretty story." The deputy reached again for the satchel. "Do not touch it," May said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut clean through the rain. Several men shifted. They were used to women pleading, crying, lowering their eyes. They were not used to a woman with a foreign face and a soft accent standing alone before them like a fence post in a flood. Then hoofbeats struck the road. A bay horse came hard through the mud, and Judge Jonah Creed swung down before the animal had fully stopped. He was tall, spare, and weather-worn, with a black coat hanging open and rain silvering his beard-shadowed jaw. The town parted for him because the court would sit tomorrow in the upstairs room over the mercantile, because men had lost land or saved land under his gavel, because he was fair in a country where fairness often arrived late and left early. He took in the scene without speaking. The train, the deputy, Rusk, Maylin holding the ribbon. His eyes paused on her satchel. Something old and private tightened his face. "Judge," Rusk said, stepping forward, "we caught her leaving. I do not see a ticket in her hand. She poisoned your witness." Jonah looked toward the freight office. "I asked Caleb dead." No, the deputy said, but he is near senseless. Then, he is not yet a silent witness. May watched the judge. She had seen him only once before, from across the street, when he refused a bribe from a railroad lawyer and made the man remove his hat before speaking to a widow. His face had seemed made of law and loss. Now he looked at her as if she belonged to both. "What is in your hand, Miss Lynn?" he asked. Her throat moved. "I do not know yet." "You do not know." "I know what it might prove. I know men will hurt someone before they let it speak." Rusk scoffed. "A ribbon cannot speak." Jonah stepped onto the platform, water dripping from the brim of his hat. He did not take the ribbon. He only held out his hand, palm up, giving her the choice. The whole platform waited. May placed the blue ribbon in his palm. For one instant, the judge was not looking at evidence. He was looking at a memory. The hard line of his mouth trembled so slightly most would have missed it. May did not. He turned the ribbon under the lantern, and near the torn end, stitched in dark thread, were two initials. E.C. Jonah closed his fist. The train whistle cried long and low, filling the prairie with a sound like warning. "Deputy," Jonah said, "take Miss Lynn to my office." Rusk's smile vanished. Jail, you mean?" "I said my office." "She is a danger." Jonah looked at him then, and the rain seemed to hold its breath. So are many men who speak too quickly. The deputy hesitated. The crowd did too. In that pause, a second shout came from the freight office. Caleb Pike was awake, and he was asking for the woman they had already condemned. They took May through the rain beneath lanterns that guttered in the wind. Blue Ribbon Crossing had been named for the creek that bent like a silk strip through the grasslands. But by 1884, most folks said it was named for the county fair prize that brought ranchers from 3 territories every autumn. There was a main street of false front stores, a white church on the rise, a blacksmith shed, 2 saloons, 1 schoolhouse, and a depot that held the town together like a nail through boards. May had arrived 6 months earlier in the 3rd passenger car of an eastbound train that never made it farther than the flooded bridge beyond town. She had stepped down with a cedar satchel, a roll sleeping mat, and a letter from Reverend Alden saying the settlement needed someone who could tend burns, childbirth fevers, coughs, snakebite, and 1,000 small injuries that killed frontier people between sunrise and supper. Some called her Miss Lynn. Some called her the China Doctor, though she was born in Oregon Territory and had learned much of her healing from a Scottish missionary, a pious midwife, and her mother, who could read a pulse by laying 3 fingers on a wrist and listening with her whole soul. May had healed a blacksmith's infected hand. She had sat through 2 nights with Mrs. Bell's youngest child when scarlet fever took the house. She had delivered a baby in a storm, while the real doctor was drunk at the Silver Spur. Still, gratitude in Blue Ribbon Crossing did not always last longer than fear. Judge Jonah Creed knew that better than most. His office stood behind the courthouse room, a narrow place smelling of paper, lamp oil, and rain-damp wool. Shelves bowed under law books. A stove glowed red in the corner. On the desk lay a framed photograph turned face down. The deputy brought May inside and shut the door, leaving wet footprints on the floorboards. Jonah placed the blue ribbon on a square of clean paper. He did not sit. "Tell me why Caleb Pike sent for you." May loosened her cloak. Her hair was pinned at the nape of her neck with a plain comb of dark wood. Rain had threaded loose strands against her cheek because he was afraid of Mr. Russ. "That is a large accusation." "I know." "What did Caleb witness?" May looked at the closed door. Outside, boots moved, voices pressed. "He worked at the freight office. 3 weeks ago, he saw crates unloaded after midnight. They were marked as farm tonic for the fair, but one broke. Inside were bottles with no maker's seal, no proper measure, and a powder packet wrapped in blue ribbon. Jonah's expression changed only in the eyes. Blue Ribbon Stock Remedy. Yes, that remedy won the fair prize last year. It killed 2 milk cows on the Haskell place, May said. It made the Morrison boy bleed from the gums after he swallowed some, thinking it was molasses medicine. It is not remedy. It is cheap spirits, bitter herbs, and mineral poison. Can you prove that? I can prove what is in it. I cannot prove who ordered it hidden. Caleb could. He said the ledger had Mr. Rusk's mark, not the company's. He said he tore the ribbon from one crate because the initial stitched on it frightened him. Jonah looked down at the ribbon. E.C. May studied his face. Those are not Mr. Rusk's initial. No, Jonah said. They were my wife's. The stove popped softly. For the first time since the platform, May felt something colder than rain touch her spine. Your wife, Eleanor Creed. He said the name carefully, like a man lifting a lantern in a room full of ghosts. She died 3 years ago. I am sorry. He did not answer the sympathy. Men like him often did not know where to put it. What was her ribbon doing around Rusk's grates? May asked. Jonah turned toward the window. Rain blurred his reflection in the black glass. Eleanor used blue ribbon to bind prize entries at the fair. Jams, sewing, preserves. After she died, a chunk of her things went missing from my ranch during a spring cattle drive. I thought some drifter took it. Perhaps not. He faced her again. Caleb Pike is a drunk when frightened and a liar when paid. Why would he come to you? Because his wife died after taking a bottle of that remedy sold for lung weakness. He thought it was bad luck until he saw the crates. Then he thought it was murder. Jonah's hand went to the back of his chair, gripping it until his knuckles paled. And you were at the freight office this afternoon? Yes. Caleb told me to come at 4. I found him in the alley at past, struck down. I tried to wake him. Then Mr. Rusk's men came. And you ran. I went where Caleb told me the ledger had been hidden. The depot? She nodded. But I found only the ribbon beneath a loose board by the baggage scale. Someone had taken the rest. Jonah's gaze sharpened. You admit you searched hidden property at the depot? I admit I wanted the truth before a man was killed for it. A faint sound might have been anger or admiration. Miss Lynn, that answer would make a poor defense in court. It is not meant for court. It is meant for you. The words hung between them. Jonah moved away from the desk, restless now. Outside the office, thunder rolled low over the prairie. From the freight room across the yard came another shout. Then a woman's cry. Jonah opened the door. Mrs. Bell stood beneath the eaves, pale and shaking. Judge, Caleb is asking for you, and he keeps saying a name. What name? She looked past him at May. Eleanor. Jonah took his hat from the peg. May reached for her satchel. No, he said. She froze. You are not going near him until I know what you gave him. The words were hard, but the wound beneath them was harder. May lifted her chin. You think as they do. I think my wife trusted every bottle that promised relief, every hand that promised cure, until she died with black lines under her nails and no doctor able to tell her poison. No, but you carry remedies I do not understand, and you carry grief you have not questioned, she said quietly. The deputy looked as if he wished the floor would open. Jonah's eyes darkened. For a moment, May thought he would send her to jail after all. Instead, he stepped back and held the door wider. Bring your satchel, he said. But if Caleb worsens under your hand, law will not save you from this town. May walked past him into the rain. Caleb Pike lay on a cot in the freight office, his face gray, his hair plastered to his skull. The room smelled of coal smoke, wet burlap, and fear. His wife was gone, but her sister knelt by him, whispering prayers. One lamp burned near a stack of crates stamped with Rusk cattle supply. May set her satchel on the floor and washed her hands in a basin. Her movements were calm, because they had to be. Panic wasted breath. She checked Caleb's pulse, lifted his eyelid, smelled the cloth near his mouth. "Not my tea," she said. Jonah stood across from her. "What then?" "Laudanum, too much, but not enough to kill if we keep him breathing." Russ, who had followed them in, gave a bitter laugh. "Convenient." Maya ignored him. She mixed coffee, salt, and a bitter infusion from her own bottle, then looked at the judge. "Hold his shoulders." Jonah hesitated. "Hold him," she said. The command was simple, practical, without pleading. Jonah moved to the cot and braced Caleb as May worked the medicine between the man's lips. Caleb gagged. His sister cried out. May turned him quickly so he would not choke, her sleeve soaking where he coughed against her arm. For half an hour she fought for his breath. The town watched through windows and cracks in the door. Men who had cursed her an hour earlier grew silent as Caleb's color shifted from ash to a weak, living pink. Jonah saw it. He saw the way she never once looked back to see who approved. He saw the steadiness of her hands, the intelligence in every motion, the mercy she gave, even to a witness whose words might ruin her. Near midnight, Caleb opened his eyes. His voice came like a boot scraping gravel. "Ledger." Jonah bent close. "Where is it?" Caleb's lips trembled. "Not safe." "Who struck you?" Caleb looked past Jonah to Rusk. Terror widened his eyes. Then his gaze found May. "Ribbon," he whispered. "Eleanor's ribbon." Asked the judge why his wife's name is in Rusk's book. Rusk moved. It was only a step, but May saw the flash of metal in his hand before anyone else. She seized the lamp and swung it sideways. Flame guttered. Hot oil splashed across the floor near Rusk's boots. He cursed and stumbled back. Jonah crossed the room in 2 strides, caught Rusk's wrist and twisted until a small derringer clattered onto the boards. The freight office erupted. Deputy Harlan drew his revolver. Rusk's cattle hands shouted. Caleb's sister screamed. Outside, the train whistle sounded once more, though the train had already gone. A lonely echo from the far bend. Jonah held Rusk against a crate. He brought a gun into a sick room. Rusk breathed hard, but the fear passed from his face and left pride behind. "I came to protect myself from slander." "Then you chose a strange way." "There is no ledger." Rusk. "There is only a drunk, a foreign herb woman, and a judge too tangled in old sorrow to know he is being played." That struck where it was aimed. Jonah's grip loosened for half a second. Rusk smiled. May picked up the derringer with a cloth and placed it on the desk beside the torn ribbon. "Then let the law decide." Rusk looked at her. "The law is men, Miss Lynn, and men tire of women who do not know their place." Jonah turned him over to the deputy. But even as Rusk was taken out into the rain, May knew the battle had not ended. It had only come into the open. At dawn, Blue Ribbon Crossing woke Maine. The sky cleared to a hard blue, and mud shone in wagon ruts along Main Street. Word had moved faster than the storm. By breakfast, half the town said May had saved Caleb Pike. The other half said she had done it to keep him alive long enough to twist his words. Rusk's man stood outside the Silver Spur and told anyone who would listen that Judge Creed had lost his sense over a pretty healer from the coast. Mai heard the whispers when she stepped onto the courthouse porch. She had not slept. Her eyes burned, and her dress still smelled of smoke and medicine. Jonah stood beside her, hat low, staring across the street at a town he had served for 9 years and trusted less with each passing hour. "You should stay inside," he said. "I have patience. You have enemies. Sometimes they are the same people." He looked at her then, and despite everything, a faint crease appeared near his mouth. Not quite a smile, but the memory of one. A wagon rattled up before they could say more. Amos Lark, foreman from Jonah's ranch, jumped down with mud to his knees. "Judge," he called, "your mare's down, the gray one. She's falling wrong, and the vet's gone south. Jonah's face tightened. Sable, Amos nodded. I would not have come with Cor sitting, but shall die if we don't get help. Jonah looked toward the courthouse, where people already gathered for the preliminary hearing. Then he looked at May. She had heard the name Sable spoken with affection. The gray mare was known across the county, a fast, proud animal Eleanor Creed had raised from a filly. Mai saw the conflict in Jonah's jaw. Duty to court, duty to a living creature, duty to the past. I know births. Mai Xiao. Amos blinked. Horse births. Pain is pain. Life is life. I have helped mares, goats, women, and one very angry mule. This time Jonah almost smiled. Then the church bell rang 9 times. Court would begin. If I leave, he said, Russ will say, I fled the bench. If you stay, May said, your mare might die. He looked at the courthouse doors, then at the road leading west to his ranch. All his life had been made of choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. Yet right had begun to split before him, like a trail in tall grass. Maya understood before he spoke. I will go, she said. No, you cannot leave court. I can help the mare. You think Russ will let you ride out safely? I think if I wait for men like Russ to permit my mercy, many things will die. Amos rubbed his jaw. I can take her. Back way past the creek. Jonah stepped close enough that his voice lowered. Miss Lynn, you do not owe me this. No, she said. I owe the mare nothing either. That is why it is clean. He did not answer. For a long moment, the noise of town seemed far away. They stood on the porch with the morning sun on wet boards. 2 people bound not by trust yet, but by a shared understanding that suffering did not wait for permission. Jonah took a small key from his vest. There is a red barn behind my house. Medicine shelf inside. Clean cloths, boiled water, if Mrs. Vale has kept the stove. Amos will take you, and Miss Lynn. She paused at the wagon. If anything goes wrong, send for me. She held his gaze. If anything goes wrong, Judge, I will be too busy to send. The wagon lurched west. Blue Ribbon Crossing fell behind, and the prairie opened in long waves of grass and sun. Mai sat beside Amos with her satchel in her lap, listening to the wheels suck through mud and the meadowlark's call from fence posts. The land was vast in a way that still startled her. In the towns along the railroad, men crowded one another, watched one another, judged one another through curtains and doorways. Out here the sky did the watching. Jonah's ranch stood in a shallow valley near cottonwoods and a creek flashing brown from rain. A white house faced east. Its porch sagged at one corner. Beyond it, the red barn rose warm against the grass with horses milling anxiously in the corral. Mrs. Vale, Jonah's housekeeper, met them with sleeves rolled and worry sharp in her face. You are the healer. Yes, you are smaller than I hoped. I often am. Mrs. Vale stared, then gave a short laugh despite herself. Barns this way. Sable lay on clean straw, sides heaving, eyes rolling white. The foal's position was wrong. May knew it the moment she knelt. She spoke softly to the mare in English first, then in the quiet syllables her mother had used over frightened animals. She did not know if words mattered to beasts, but tone did, and breath did. Hours passed in sweat, straw, and trembling effort. May removed her gloves. She worked with patience and strength no one expected from her narrow wrists. Amos held the mare's head. Mrs. Vale brought water. Outside, ranch hands stood useless and reverent, hats in hand. At last Mai shifted the foal enough, pulled with the rhythm of Sable's body, and her wet dark shape slid into the straw. The foal did not breathe. A hand went to Mrs. Vale's mouth. May tore the membrane, rubbed hard, cleared the nostrils, bent low and breathed once into the little animal's mouth. Again. The foal jerked, coughed, and drew in life with a thin, astonished sound. Even Amos Lark turned away to hide his eyes. Sable lifted her head and nickered. Mai sat back on her heels, covered in straw and earth, her arms shaking. For a moment she was not accused, not foreign, not watched. She was only tired, and the living warmth before her was answer enough. Then she saw the mark branded on a crate near the barn wall. Rust Cattle Supply. Beside it sat 3 bottles of Blue Ribbon stock remedy. Her blood cooled. "Who bought these?" she asked. Amos followed her gaze. "Traveling agent came through last month, said it strengthened breeding mares. Has Sable taken any?" Mrs. Vale looked stricken. "Only a spoon in mash." Judge threw the rest out after 1 bottle smelled foul. May picked up a bottle with a cloth. The liquid inside clung darkly to the glass. She uncorked it and sniffed. Bitter almond, spirits, mineral bite, poison in a prize bottle. She wrapped it carefully and placed it in her satchel. "You cannot take ranch property," said a voice from the barn door. May turned. Elias Rust stood there with 2 riders behind him. Amos reached for the rifle by the post, but one of Rust's men already had a shotgun pointed low. Rust stepped inside as if he owned the straw, the horses, the air. "Judge is busy in town. I thought I would pay a neighborly call." "You are not neighborly," Mrs. Vale snapped. Rust ignored her, his eyes fixed on Me's satchel. "That bottle is mine. It was sold to this ranch," May said, "and stolen by you." The foal struggled to rise behind her, all knees and wet courage. Mai stood slowly, placing herself between Rust and the satchel. "You fear glass more than guns, Mr. Rust." He smiled. "I fear lies, especially when carried by women clever enough to make fools of grieving men." He came toward her. Amos moved and the shotgun cocked. Then a horse galloped into the yard. Jonah Creed rode in hard, black coat flying, face set like judgment. He had left court. Dust rose behind him. His horse slid near the barn, and he dismounted with a rifle in one hand. "Step away from her," he said. Rust's face flushed. "You abandoned the bench." "I recessed for 1 hour. It has been 4. Then I expect everyone had time to consider their conscience." Rust laughed. "You would ruin yourself over her?" Jonah did not look at Mace. "No, I will ruin myself over the truth. She happens to be standing nearest to it." The words struck her more deeply than praise. Rust glanced at the rifle, at Amos, at the watching ranch hands who had moved quietly into the yard. His advantage thinned. "This is not finished," he said. "No," Jonah replied. "It will finish in court." Rust backed out, but his eyes promised fire. After he rode away, the barn seemed to exhale. Jonah looked at the foal, then at Sable. His face changed. The judge disappeared. The widower remained. "She lived," May said. "Both did." He removed his hat. No words came for a while. He walked to the mare, laid a hand on her neck, then looked back at May with something unguarded in his eyes. "Eleanor raised her," he said. "I know." "How?" "The way everyone said Sable's name, like she carried more than a saddle." His throat worked. "I have not thanked you. You came when danger came." "That is thanks enough." "No," he said quietly. "It is not." He stepped toward her, but stopped before closeness could become something neither of them was ready to name. Straw clung to her sleeve. A streak of soot marked her cheek. He lifted his hand as if to brush it away, then remembered himself and let it fall. Mai saw the restraint. She respected it. More dangerously, she felt warmed by it. Mrs. Vale broke the silence by clearing her throat. "You both look like you have wrestled a thunderstorm. Come inside before you fall over." In the ranch kitchen, May washed at the basin while Jonah stood by the window, watching the road for riders. Mrs. Vale set coffee and bread on the table. No one spoke of love. No one spoke even of trust. Yet when May's hands trembled too hard to lift the cup, Jonah quietly slid it closer and turned the handle toward her fingers. A small act, a sheltering act, one she would remember long after the coffee cooled. By evening, the threat had teeth. A boy from town arrived with a message tucked under his vest. The courthouse hearing had turned sour after Jonah left. Rust's lawyer had demanded the judge recuse himself, claiming personal attachment to the accused healer and prejudice against a respected stockman. Men at the Silver Spur were saying May had bewitched him. Someone had thrown a stone through the window of her small clinic behind the church, and Caleb Pike had disappeared. Jonah read the note twice, then folded it with care that looked almost violent. "Who brought Caleb out?" May asked. The boy swallowed. "Don't know, ma'am. Deputy says he stepped outside for air. When he came back, cot was empty. Caleb could barely stand," May said. "Then someone carried him," Jonah replied. They rode back at sunset. The prairie seemed too beautiful for what waited. Grass shone gold. Clouds trailed purple along the horizon. The newborn foal stood uncertainly near Sable, alive because May had not feared dirt, blood, or judgment. Jonah rode beside the wagon, and every so often she felt him look at her. Not with suspicion now, but with concern. He did not know how to hide. At the edge of town, they smelled smoke. May's clinic was burning. Not a grand fire, not yet, but flames crawled up the back wall where dry herbs hung from rafters. Neighbors stood with buckets, arguing more than helping. The church bell clanged. Reverend Alden shouted for a line from the pump. May jumped from the wagon before it stopped. "My mother's chest," she said. Jonah caught her arm. "No, my mother's chest is inside." The roof cracked. May tore free and ran. Heat struck her in the doorway. Smoke thickened the room where she had slept. Treated wounds, written letters for men who could not write, brewed teas for women who came by the back door so their husbands would not know they trusted her. Shelves had fallen. Glass popped. She dropped low, covering her mouth, and crawled toward the corner where the cedar chest sat under a blanket. A beam groaned above. She dragged the chest once, twice. It caught on a loose board. Smoke blinded her. Then Jonah was there. He came through the flame-lit haze with a wet coat over his head, coughing hard. He lifted the beam enough for her to free the chest, then hauled both her and the box toward the door as burning plaster fell behind them. They stumbled into the yard together and collapsed on the wet grass while townspeople shouted and buckets flew. Mike clung to the chest. Jonah's sleeve smoked. His hand was burned red across the knuckles. "You fool," she gasped. He coughed and tried to laugh. "I believe that is contempt of court." She turned his hand palm up and saw blistering already rising. "Sit down, Miss Lynn." She sat. In the middle of the chaos, with her clinic burning behind her and half the town staring, May opened her satchel and tended the judge's hand. She spread honey salve and wrapped linen around his palm. Her own hands were blackened with soot. Her face was streaked with tears she had no memory of shedding. The cedar chest lay beside them, safe but scorched. Mrs. Bell came near, holding a bucket. She looked from May to the burning clinic, then to Jonah's injured hand. Shame softened her mouth. "I have a spare room," she said, barely audible. "Until you rebuild." No one answered at first. Then the blacksmith said, "I've got boards." Reverend Alden said, "The church hall is empty." The town shifted by inches, not all at once, not cleanly. Fear did not vanish because one fire revealed cruelty. But some people had seen May run into danger for memory, and Jonah run after her for life. And the sight unsettled the easy story Rusk had given them. When the flames were beaten down, Jonah found something nailed to the back door of the clinic. A blue ribbon. This one was whole. On it, written in black ink, were the words, "Last warning." Mai stared at it without expression. Jonah's burned hand curled despite the pain. "We need Caleb," he said. "No," Mai answered. He looked at her. "We need to know why Eleanor's ribbon was on those grates," she said. "Caleb can tell us part, but she is the beginning." Jonah went still. That night, at the ranch, May opened her mother's cedar chest in the lamplight of Jonah's kitchen. Mrs. Vale had gone to bed after muttering, that both of them were too stubborn to live long. Outside, wind moved along the eaves. Somewhere in the barn, Sable stamped softly. The chest held silk packets, old letters, a porcelain cup cracked and mended with wire, dried orange peel wrapped in paper, and a book of remedies written in 3 hands. Mai touched each thing with reverence. At the bottom was a cloth bundle. She unwrapped it and found a ledger page. Jonah leaned forward. "Where did that come from?" Mai's brow furrowed. "I have never seen it." The page was folded around a small square of blue ribbon. Jonah took the page with his uninjured hand. His eyes moved over the columns. Dates, amounts, names, shipments. Rust cattle supply appeared 6 times. Beside it, in a fine slanted hand, were notes. E. Creed, questioned ingredient list. E. Creed, refused price certification. E. Creed, to be handled before autumn fair. Jonah sat down as if struck. May looked at the initials. "Your wife knew." He stared at the paper, but his eyes were in another year. Eleanor judged preserves and sewing at the fair. Later, they asked her to help mark entries because she had a steady hand. The year before she died, Blue Ribbon Stock Remedy won the sponsor prize. She told me something smelled wrong. I thought she meant politics. She investigated. She was always braver than I deserve. Mai's voice softened. "Do not turn love into punishment. Judge." He closed his eyes. For 3 years, he had believed his wife's death was misfortune, then perhaps weakness, then perhaps his failure to find the right doctor in time. Reef had worn many masks, and he had bowed to each one. Now the page in his hand suggested Eleanor had been silenced, not taken. "Why was this in your chest?" he asked. May shook her head. "My mother's things came to me after she died. Some passed through San Francisco, then Omaha, then here. Perhaps someone hid it in the wrong trunk. Perhaps someone meant it to reach you and could not. Caleb? Or your wife?" Jonah opened his mouth, but no sound came. A floorboard creaked outside. May looked toward the back door. Jonah rose and took the rifle from beside the stove. He motioned for her to stay back, then crossed the kitchen. Before he reached the door, a faint knock came. 3 taps. A pause. 2 more. May whispered, "Caleb." Jonah opened the door. Caleb Pike fell inside. He was pale, feverish, and shaking. His shirt was torn. Mud caked his boots. Behind him stood a girl of perhaps 12, thin as a rail, with frightened eyes and a man's coat wrapped around her shoulders. Caleb collapsed into a chair. "Had to get out," he rasped. "They were moving me to Rust's lion camp." "Who helped you?" Jonah asked. The girl lifted her chin. "I dare." Caleb coughs. "My niece Ruth May moved quickly, checking him. You should not have walked. Didn't walk all the way. Hid in a hay wagon." His fever-bright eyes found Jonah. "I lied before. Not about Russ, about your wife." Jonah gripped the chair back. Caleb swallowed. "Eleanor came to the freight office the week before she died. She had ledger pages. Asked me to keep a packet safe if anything happened. I was scared. Russ paid me to say she never came. After she died, I hid what I had. Then I drank to forget it." "Where is the rest?" Jonah asked. Caleb looked at Ruth. The girl reached into the coat and pulled out a blue ribbon rosette, the kind pinned to a county fair winner. The center had been slit open and sewn shut again. May took a small knife and cut the stitches. Inside lay 2 folded pages and a letter. The ink faded but legible. Jonah knew the hand before he read the name. "My dearest Jonah, if this reaches you, then I failed to bring the matter before you myself. Forgive me for keeping silent until I had proof. Rust has been selling poison under a prize name, and men in our town have helped him. If I am wrong, burn this and laugh at me gently. If I am right, do not let grief make you smaller than justice." He read no further aloud. The room blurred for May, though she was not the one addressed. She watched Jonah fold over the letter, not breaking. Not yet. But bending beneath 3 years of sorrow suddenly given a shape, Ruth began to cry silently. Caleb covered his face. I let her die with folks thinking it was sickness. Jonah's voice was low. Did Russ poison her? I don't know if his hand poured it, Caleb said, but he sent the bottle. Said it was nerve tonic from back east. After she took it, she got worse. I knew. God forgive me, I knew. Jonah turned away. No one moved. Then May stepped beside him, not touching, only near enough that he did not stand alone in the terrible knowledge. After a long while, he spoke. Tomorrow, I cannot sit as judge. May looked at him sharply. My wife is named in evidence. I am not impartial. If you recuse yourself, Russ' lawyer might control the hearing. And he might destroy you. Yes, then why? He looked at her, and in the lamplight, his grief was no longer a locked room. It was open, painful, honest. Because law used for love of one person only becomes revenge. Eleanor asked me not to let grief make me smaller than justice. May felt the words settle inside her. This was not the same man who had doubted her medicine, because his heart had been broken by poison. He was still wounded, still afraid, but he had chosen truth even when truth cost him power. Outside, horses stirred in the dark. Then a gunshot cracked from the barn. Jonah blew out the lamp. The kitchen dropped into shadow. Another shot shattered the window. Ruth screamed. May pulled the girl down behind the table. Jonah shoved Caleb to the floor and moved toward the door with his rifle. Mrs. Vale appeared on the stairs with a shotgun and a nightcap, looking murderous. Russ, she hissed. Or men hoping we think so, Jonah said. The barn doors were open, lantern lights swinging wildly inside. A horse screamed. May's heart lurched toward Sable and the newborn fall. Jonah saw her face. No. The barn. No. But she was already moving. They ran low through the yard as bullets snapped into fence rails. Amos and two hands returned fire from the bunkhouse. Smoke and moonlight mixed over the corral. Inside the barn, straw had been kicked toward a lantern, and flame licked at the edge. Mai grabbed a blanket and beat it down while Jonah covered the doorway. The foe stumbled in terror, trapped between a stall wall and a fallen rake. Mai went to it, speaking softly. Hands out. A rider burst from the shadows behind her. Jonah shouted. The rider aimed at May. Jonah fired first. The man fell from the saddle and hit the dirt hard. His hat rolled away. It was one of Russ' cattle hands. By the time the shooting stopped, two attackers had fled. One lay wounded, and the barn still stood. But the message was clear. Russ would burn animals, kill witnesses, and shoot a healer before letting Eleanor Creed's letter reach court. At first light, Jonah made his choice public. He rode into Blue Ribbon Crossing with May, Caleb, Ruth, Amos, and Mrs. Vale in a wagon behind him. The Blue Ribbon rosette lay in a tin box under Mai's hands. Eleanor's letter rested in Jonah's coat pocket. His burned hand throbbed beneath its bandage, and blood from a splinter cut marked his collar. But he sat straight in the saddle. The town gathered before he reached the courthouse. Russ stood on the steps with his lawyer and three men, carrying rifles they pretended were walking sticks. Judge Creed, Russ called. You look tired. Perhaps unfit to preside. Jonah dismounted. I am unfit to preside. The crowd stirred. Russ's smile spread. At last, wisdom. Jonah climbed the steps until he stood one below Russ. Because new evidence concerns the death of my wife, I will not sit in judgment over a matter where my own grief is witness. Russ turned to the crowd, triumphant. You hear that? I have sent for Judge Abernathy from Fort Laramie. Jonah continued. Until he arrives, Deputy Harlan will hold Elias Russ on charges of assault, witness tampering, arson, and attempted murder. Russ's smile died. His lawyer sputtered. On whose authority? Jonah removed the badge of temporary circuit authority from his coat and handed it to the deputy. On the authority of sworn statements from Caleb Pike, Ruth Pike, Amos Lark, and the wounded man in my barn, who has decided he prefers prison to hanging. The crowd exploded with voices. Deputy Harlan looked at the badge, then at Russ. For a moment May saw the whole town's weakness balanced in one ordinary man. Then the deputy drew his revolver. "Mr. Russ," he said, voice shaking but clear, "you will come with me." Russ did not move. His eyes searched the crowd, measuring old favors. Some men looked away, some did not. The blacksmith stepped beside the deputy. Reverend Alden joined him. Mrs. Bell stood on the porch of the boarding house with a rolling pin in both hands as if it were a club. Russ's gaze landed on May. "This is her doing," he shouted. "You would take the word of an Eastern herb woman over a man who built half this town." May stepped forward with the tin box. Her voice carried, not because it was loud, but because it did not tremble. "No, they should not take my word alone. They should take your bottles, your ledgers, your hired man's confession, Caleb Pike's witness, and Eleanor Cree's letter. Truth does not become foreign because I hold it." Silence followed. Then Ruth Pike, the thin girl in the man's coat, came to stand beside May. "My aunt died from his remedy," she said, "and he tried to take Uncle Caleb." A woman in the crowd began to weep. Russ saw the tide turning. His hand darted beneath his coat. Jonah moved, but his burned hand slowed him. Mai saw the motion. Without thinking, she flung the tin box. It struck Rusk's wrist as the gun came free. The shot went wild, smashing the courthouse window. Deputy Harlan tackled him. The blacksmith seized the gun. Men surged forward. Russ fought like a cornered bull, but pride made poor armor against a town finally ashamed of its fear. They dragged him down the steps. In the struggle, the blue ribbon rosette fell open on the muddy street. Eleanor's hidden pages spilled out, fluttering in the wind. Jonah bent to gather them, but his injured hand failed. Mai knelt beside him. Together, they lifted the pages from the mud. Their fingers touched once over the torn ribbon. Neither pulled away quickly. Judge Abernathy arrived 2 days later on the noon train, red-faced, sharp-eyed, and impatient with nonsense. By then, the evidence had multiplied. Russ's warehouse yielded crates of false remedy, mineral powder, forged price seals, and a trunk of stolen things from the Creed Ranch, including Eleanor's sewing case and more blue ribbon marked with her initials. The wounded ranch hand confessed that Russ ordered the clinic burned and Caleb taken. The traveling agent was caught trying to board a freight car west. The trial lasted 3 days in the upstairs room over the mercantile because the courthouse window had not yet been repaired. Maya testified in a calm voice. Men tried to make her sound strange, she answered plainly. They asked about herbs, foreign remedies, old custom. She answered with measurements, symptoms, names, and results. When Russ's lawyer sneered that she was no doctor, she looked at him and said, "No, sir, I am the woman people call when the doctor is absent, drunk, afraid, or too late." A few people laughed before they could stop themselves. Jonah did not sit on the bench. He sat in the back, a witness and widower, his bandaged hand resting on his knee. When Eleanor's letter was read, he bowed his head, and no one in town mistook that for weakness. Russ was found guilty on enough charges to send him away in irons. But justice did not heal everything in one stroke. After the verdict, Blue Ribbon Crossing had to learn what to do with its shame. Some folks came to May with apologies too polished to be honest. Some avoided her. Some left baskets of eggs or flour at the church hall, where she had set up a temporary clinic. Mrs. Bell came in person with a quilt and cried so hard, May had to make her sit down and drink tea. Jonah did not apologize quickly. Instead, he worked. He brought lumber from his ranch and helped rebuild the clinic wall. He stood on the ladder with his burned hand wrapped and hammered badly with the other until May took the hammer away. "You are terrible at that," she said. "I am a judge. That is not an excuse for crooked nails." He looked down at the bent nail. Then, at her face. A smile, real this time, pulled at his mouth. It changed him so much she had to look away. Every day, trust grew by boards and buckets, by rides to distant cabins where babies were fever or men had broken ribs, by quiet suppers at the ranch when storms made the road unsafe. Jonah learned the names of the roots in her satchel. Mai learned he took coffee black, hated peas, and always touched Eleanor's photograph before leaving the house. Not because he could not release the past, but because love had made him faithful, not dead. One evening, late in autumn, the county fair returned. No one had known whether to hold it after this scandal, but Reverend Alden said a town that stopped gathering because of sin gave sin too much power. So lanterns were hung from the cottonwoods, fiddlers played near the church step, children chased one another between pie tables, and ranchers brought horses brushed shining as satin. There was no stock remedy contest that year. There was, however, a new prize for service to the community, voted on by folded slips placed in a flour tin. Mai did not know about it until Mrs. Vale pushed her toward the platform in front of the depot. "What is this?" May whispered. "Something you cannot cure your way out of," Mrs. Vale said. Jonah stood beside the station master. The evening train waited on the tracks, steam curling beneath the sunset. Its whistle would mark the close of the fair, as it did every year. In Jonah's hand was a blue ribbon, not Eleanor's, not Rust's, a new one, bright and clean, with gold letters stamped across the center. For her courage and mercy, May stopped at the edge of the platform. The town looked back at her, not perfectly, not without memory, but differently. The blacksmith removed his hat. Mrs. Bell wiped her eyes. Ruth Pike grinned from beside Caleb, who leaned on a cane and looked older, humbler, alive. Jonah came down the steps to meet May, instead of making her climb toward him. "I was asked to present this," he said. "Because you are a judge?" "No," his eyes warmed. "Because everyone knows I would object if they gave it to anyone else." She almost laughed, but emotion caught her first. He held out the ribbon. May did not take it at once. "Blue ribbons have caused trouble in this town." "Yes," Jonah said. "This one is meant to end some. Only some. We are human. Some is a respectable beginning." She took the ribbon. The train whistle blew, long and mournful, across the prairie. It was the same sound that had cried through rain the night he found her on the platform, accused and alone. But now the sound did not seem like warning. It seemed like distance closing behind them, like the past being carried away one iron mile at a time. Jonah looked at the train. "When I saw you holding that ribbon, I thought the worst answer had come back to punish me. And now I think mercy sometimes arrives carrying what grief is afraid to touch." May lowered her eyes to the ribbon. "Your wife was brave." "Yes. I wish I had known her." Jonah's voice softened. "I think she would have liked you." The platform blurred slightly. May turned the ribbon in her hands. "I have spent much of my life proving I am not what people fear." "I know." "No," she said gently. "You are beginning to know." He accepted the correction with a small nod. That, more than any speech, moved her. "I cannot promise this town will never wound you again," he said. "No town can promise that. I cannot promise I will never be foolish with grief. No man can promise that." His mouth curved. "Then what is left?" She looked toward the ranch road, where the prairie rolled gold under the sinking sun. She thought of Sable and the awkward foal, of the rebuilt clinic, of Ruth learning letters at her table, of Jonah turning his coffee cup handle toward her when her hands were tired. "Work," she said. "Truth. Soup when someone is sick. A roof in bad weather. Someone who comes through smoke when he says no." Jonah's eyes shone. "That sounds like a home." May looked at him then, fully. It could be. He did not touch her before the town. He only offered his arm, formal as a courtly promise, humble as a man asking rather than claiming. Mai placed her hand on his sleeve. Together they stepped down from the depot platform as the last train pulled away. The blue ribbon moved in the wind between them, bright against the dust behind them. Blue Ribbon crossing lit its lanterns one by one. Ahead the prairie road led toward the ranch, the clinic, the church bell, the barn, the work of forgiveness, and a house where grief would no longer sit alone at the table. And long after the train disappeared into the dark, its whistle seemed to linger over the grass, not crying this time, but singing them home.